Ethan Parker hurried down the cracked sidewalk of downtown Cleveland, the chilly Ohio wind pushing against his jacket as he checked the time on his phone for the fifth time. His stomach tightened every time the numbers glowed back at him. Today wasn't just another day. This was his only real chance, an interview at Ironworks Automotive, one of the biggest and most respected companies in the country. A company that could finally take him out of paycheck to paycheck living. He had studied, rehearsed answers, polished his boots, and woken up before sunrise just to be ready. Everything depended on getting there on time. But the morning commute wasn't going his way. His bus was late, the traffic was loud and distracting, and even though Ethan tried to remain calm, he could feel his nerves buzzing inside him like electricity. His mother had texted him earlier, telling him she was praying for him. His younger sister had left a goofy voice note reminding him to breathe. They believed in him. They needed him to succeed. Ethan pushed forward, trying to ignore the pressure building in his chest. Just make it on time, he kept repeating in his mind. Just make it. He crossed the intersection, weaving between pedestrians, when something caught his attention, a faint scraping sound, followed by a small gasp of frustration. He turned his head and saw a young woman around his age, sitting in a wheelchair near the edge of the sidewalk. The right wheel was twisted inward at an awkward angle, clearly broken, and she was struggling to move even an inch. People passed her without a second glance, too busy or unwilling to get involved. Ethan slowed, torn between empathy and urgency. He knew he didn't have minutes to spare. His interview was already dangerously close, but the sight of her struggling alone pulled at something in him. Ethan took one step toward her, then hesitated. If he missed this interview, there was no second chance. He needed this job to support his family, to pay off debts, to finally stop worrying every week about overdue bills. His future was waiting just a few streets away, and yet the girl's tired, embarrassed expression struck him hard. She wasn't waving for help. She wasn't calling out. She was silently trying to lift herself despite the pain of the jammed wheel. Ethan swallowed, feeling the weight of the moment settle on his shoulders like a responsibility he didn't ask for, but couldn't walk away from either. He approached slowly, so he wouldn't startle her. "Hey," he said gently, "looks like that wheel's giving you a hard time." She looked up, startled for a moment, then tried to smile as if to hide her struggle. "It's okay. I think I just hit the curb wrong," she said quietly, though the worry in her eyes told another story. Ethan crouched down to get a closer look at the wheel. It wasn't a simple jam. It was bent, probably from uneven pavement or long-term wear. "I can fix this if you want," he offered. "I'm a mechanic. Well, trying to be a better one." The girl hesitated, her fingers twisting nervously at the armrest. Most people who offered help only stayed for a moment before giving up. Others acted annoyed, as if helping her was an inconvenience, but Ethan didn't look impatient. He didn't look disinterested. He was kneeling in front of the chair like the rest of the world had paused. "You don't have to," she whispered. "You probably have somewhere to be." Ethan forced a tiny smile, even though anxiety pulsed inside him. "Don't worry about it. Let's just get you moving again." Without waiting for permission, he pulled a small multi-tool from his pocket, a tool he always carried, because life had taught him something always breaks when you least expect it. As Ethan worked, he noticed how badly damaged the wheel actually was. The bearings were loose and the axle had shifted. He wiped grease onto his jeans and leaned closer, his breath visible in the cold air. The girl watched him quietly, unsure how someone would choose to help her when he clearly had somewhere important to be. People walked past, cars honked, and the city moved around them. But Ethan's focus never shifted. His hands moved quickly and confidently, twisting, tightening, aligning. The metal scraped, his fingers stung, and a cold breeze whipped across his back, but he didn't stop. Minutes became 15. 15 became 25. Ethan felt the pressure tightening in his chest as the time slipped past. But he didn't let it show. He tightened one last bolt and spun the wheel with his hand. It turned smoothly now, gliding, effortlessly. "Try it," he said, stepping back. The girl pushed lightly, and the chair rolled without resistance. Her eyes widened with relief and disbelief. "It's perfect," she said softly. I can't believe you fixed it." Ethan wiped the grease from his palms, giving a small shrug. "Just glad you're safe," he said. But the moment he looked at his phone again, his heart sank. He had missed the bus, and he had already missed the interview time. There was no way to make it now. His throat tightened, and he exhaled slowly, trying not to let disappointment crush him in front of her. And the girl noticed the shift in his expression immediately. Did I make you late for something important?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly with guilt. Ethan didn't want her carrying that weight. "It's nothing," he lied gently. "Just something small. You needed help. That's what mattered." She looked at him as if she wanted to say more but couldn't find the words. Ethan stood up, brushing dirt from his knees. "Take care of yourself, all right?" he said softly. She nodded, still watching him with wide, thoughtful eyes. "What's your name?" she asked before he turned away. "Ethan," he replied. "Ethan Parker." She repeated his name quietly, almost memorizing it. "Thank you, Ethan. I won't forget what you did today." He smiled weakly, nodded once, then walked away, the weight of failure pressing on him, but a small part of him, strangely hopeful, not knowing how those simple words would soon rewrite his entire life. Ethan walked slowly toward the bus stop, each step feeling heavier than the last. The winter breeze brushed against his face, but he barely noticed it. His mind replayed the situation over and over, how close he had been, how hard he had prepared, and how easily it all slipped away. He knew helping the girl had been the right thing, yet the reality of what he had lost began sinking in with every passing second. The interview wasn't just a job opportunity, it was the doorway to a stable future, something he had been chasing for years, and now it felt like sand slipping through his fingers. He reached the corner and sat down on a cold metal bench, his head dropping into his hands. Everything he tried to do for his family seemed to fall apart. He thought about the overdue rent notice taped on their fridge, his mother working double shifts at a diner despite her knee pain, and his sister studying late every night despite not having a quiet place to focus. He wanted to be the one to lift them up, but instead he felt like he kept letting everyone down. The knot in his chest tightened until breathing felt like an effort. But in the middle of that frustration, something tugged at him. He didn't regret stopping, not even for a second. The image of the girl's anxious expression. When she was stuck, the relief in her eyes when the wheel finally turned, the fragile gratitude in her voice. All of it made him feel something he hadn't felt in a long time. Purpose. Maybe he didn't fix his own life today, but he made someone else's moment easier. And somehow, that mattered to him more deeply than he expected. After sitting for several minutes, Ethan got up and began walking home. The streets were busy, cars rushing by, sirens echoing from far away, and people moving with their usual urgency. He blended into the crowd, just another face in the rush of American city life. He tried to shake off the disappointment, but it clung to him like a weight strapped to his back. As he passed a convenience store window, he caught a glimpse of himself. Messy hair, grease, stains on his hands, dirt on his knees. He looked like someone who didn't belong in a corporate office. Maybe they wouldn't have hired him anyway. Maybe this was fate. Still, fate didn't erase the pain. His phone buzzed in his pocket, and he hesitated before checking it. A part of him hoped it might be the company calling to say they wanted to reschedule. But the screen showed only a promotional message from his phone carrier. He sighed deeply. He wasn't expecting miracles, but the silence hit harder than he expected. Ethan slipped the phone back into his pocket and walked into a small park near his neighborhood. Kids were playing basketball. A couple jogged past him, and a group of friends laughed loudly at a picnic table. The contrast between their joy and his disappointment stung. He sat on a bench beside the pond, watching the frozen surface glitter beneath the pale sunlight. Time passed slowly. He let the cold air calm his mind. He replayed the girl's soft voice. "I won't forget you." He didn't even know her name. She seemed kind, gentle, and strong despite her challenge. He wondered what her story was, where she was heading, and if she ever reached her destination safely. He hoped she did. Thinking about her somehow softened the ache inside him. He wished he could have told her he didn't save her out of obligation. He helped because he knew what being invisible felt like. Eventually, Ethan pushed himself up and began heading home. His neighborhood wasn't fancy, but it was full of hard-working people trying their best. As he walked past familiar houses, he imagined how he would tell his mother he missed his chance. She wouldn't scold him, she never did, but the disappointment in her eyes would hurt anyway. More than anything, Ethan feared being seen as unreliable, even though his heart had never once turned away from someone in need. Sometimes he felt like the world punished good people more than rewarded them. When he reached his house, he paused at the front door. Light spilled from the living room, and he could hear his sister humming as she studied. He didn't want to walk in with sadness on his face. So he took a deep breath, straightened himself, and forced a small smile before turning the knob. His mother greeted him from the kitchen with hope in her voice. "How did it go?" Ethan hesitated, then gently told her the truth, that he didn't make it. She paused, then hugged him, whispering, "You'll get another chance, baby. You did the right thing." Her faith in him was both comforting and painful. After dinner, Ethan went to his small bedroom and sat on the edge of his bed. The ache of disappointment still lingered, but the warmth of his family reminded him that one moment didn't define his worth. He leaned back against the wall and stared at the ceiling. The world outside was cold, but in his home there was love, and that gave him enough strength to push through another day. As he closed his eyes, he thought once again about the girl in the wheelchair, wondering if she ever made it home safely. Before drifting into an exhausted sleep, Ethan's last thought was simple but sincere. Maybe kindness didn't give instant rewards, but it still mattered. Tomorrow was uncertain, but he had done something right today. And though he didn't know it, yet the echo of that single good deed was already traveling back toward him, ready to turn his entire life upside down. The next morning began like any other, but Ethan woke with a heaviness still clinging to his chest. His alarm buzzed quietly beside him, and he turned it off without hurry. There was no job to get ready for anymore, no interview to prepare for, no hopeful future waiting down the road. He sat on the edge of his bed, rubbing his tired eyes, wondering how he would start the day, when the most important opportunity of his life had already slipped through his fingers. Still, he forced himself to get up, because not showing up for life wasn't an option his family could afford. He made breakfast quietly, trying not to wake his mother, who had worked another late shift, and his sister, who had stayed up studying. As he stirred the scrambled eggs, his mind wandered back to the girl from yesterday. Her soft voice, her fragile gratitude, the promise in her eyes when she said she wouldn't forget him. It warmed a small part of his heart despite everything else. He wondered if she had thought about the stranger who knelt on the sidewalk, fixing a broken wheel while his own life was falling apart. Probably not, he thought. People move on. After breakfast, Ethan grabbed his worn jacket and stepped outside. The cold morning air bit at his cheeks, but he welcomed the sharpness. It reminded him he was still here, still trying. He decided to visit the auto shop where he sometimes helped a friend repair cars for extra cash. Maybe work would distract him. Maybe fixing something else would help him forget what he had lost. He shoved his hands deep into his pockets and began walking, the crunch of frost beneath his boots marking his slow steps toward another ordinary day. Halfway down the street, his phone buzzed. He almost ignored it, expecting another spam message or discount offer, but something made him check it anyway. The caller ID showed an unknown number. Ethan hesitated, then answered. "Hello?" he said cautiously. A calm but confident female voice replied, "Is this Ethan Parker?" His heartbeat quickened slightly. "Yes." "Who's speaking?" There was a pause, the kind filled with purpose, before she said 5 words that stopped him cold. "We need to meet today." Confused, Ethan asked, "I'm sorry, who is this? Is this about the interview?" He braced himself for a polite rejection, a formal apology, or worse, a reminder that he had wasted his chance, but instead the voice replied, steady and warm, "You didn't miss your interview, Ethan. You passed it." His breath caught in his throat. He stood frozen on the sidewalk, unsure whether he heard correctly. I passed? How?" "He?" asked, voice trembling. On the other end, the woman took a soft breath and said something even more shocking. "Ethan, it's me, the girl in the wheelchair." Silence hung between them for a moment as the weight of her words settled in. She continued gently. "My name is Ava Reed. I'm the founder and CEO of Reed Mobility Technologies." Ethan felt the world spin slightly. Reed Mobility, the billion-dollar mobility solutions company that partnered with hospitals and engineering firms across the country, the company whose products improved the lives of millions, and she was the CEO. Ethan stumbled back, almost losing his balance. You're the CEO, but you..." Ava laughed softly. "Yes, I don't usually introduce myself on the street. Yesterday I just needed help, and you were the only one who actually offered it." Ava's voice softened. "For weeks, I've been observing how people interact with individuals facing mobility challenges. I purposely went alone. No assistance, no security. I wanted to see real reactions. You weren't just the only one who helped, you were the only one who stayed. You didn't rush, you didn't complain, you didn't treat me like an inconvenience." Ethan swallowed hard, emotions rising in his chest. He had helped her without expecting anything, without knowing she was anyone important. Ava continued, "My company needs people like you, people with integrity, people who care." Before he could form a response, Ava added, "Meet me at our Cleveland office at noon. I want to officially offer you a position." Ethan's eyes blurred. He blinked rapidly as warmth spread through his chest. I don't know what to say," he whispered. Ava replied, "Say you'll show up this time." Ethan laughed through the tears forming in his eyes. "Yes, I'll be there, I promise." When the call ended, Ethan stood there for several seconds, letting the reality wash over him. The opportunity he thought he lost had come back to him, because of kindness, because of who he was. He ran home, unable to contain the joy flooding through him. His mother rushed to the doorway when she saw him, worry turning to shock as she watched his bright, wide smile. "Mom," he said breathlessly, "you're not going to believe this." He told her everything, from the call to the truth about Ava. His mother's eyes filled with tears as she cupped his face. "I knew your goodness would come back to you someday," she whispered. His sister squealed with excitement, hugging him so tightly he couldn't breathe. For the first time in a long while, the Parker home felt filled with hope instead of fear. At noon, Ethan stepped into the tall glass building of Reed Mobility Technologies. The lobby alone felt like another world, sleek, modern, polished. Employees hurried past in tailored suits, screens flashed with Product prototypes and posters displayed slogans about innovation and compassion. Ethan felt out of place at first, but then he saw her, Ava, waiting near the elevators with a warm smile. Gone was the struggling girl from the sidewalk. Now she looked confident, composed, and powerful, yet her eyes held the same kindness he remembered. She greeted him like an old friend. "You made it," she said. He nodded. "Wouldn't miss it." She guided him through a tour of the company, explaining the mission, showing him labs, introducing him to engineers and designers. Everyone greeted her with respect, and every time she introduced Ethan, she used the same words. "This is the man who reminded me why we started this company." He felt humbled, honored, almost overwhelmed. He had walked into her life as a stranger, but now she treated him as something far more important. Finally, they entered her office, a spacious room overlooking the city skyline. Ava handed him an envelope. Inside was an offer letter for a full-time technician. Position, benefits included, along with training opportunities to grow into a senior role. Ethan stared at the paper, his hands shaking. "Are you sure?" he whispered. Ava smiled warmly. "I choose people based on heart before skill. Skills can be taught. Integrity cannot." Tears gathered in Ethan's eyes, and he blinked them away. "Thank you for believing in me." Ava shook her head gently. "No, Ethan. Thank you for seeing me when the world didn't." As the sun set outside the tall windows, Ethan stepped out of the building with a new life waiting ahead of him. He had no fancy degree, no connections, no wealth. What he had was kindness, and today kindness had rewritten his destiny. He looked up at the glowing sky and whispered to himself, "Dad, I hope you're proud." For the first time in years, the future didn't scare him. It inspired him, all because he stopped to help someone who needed him, all because he chose compassion over convenience, and in the end, that single choice had changed everything.